now.
Hi everyone, my name's Tanya. Thank you for joining us. This year, the International Women's Day theme is Break the Bias, aiming to forge a world that is diverse, equitable and inclusive for all women. And to celebrate with the International Women's Day theme and encourage conversations around the acceleration of women's equality, we wanted to host what we hope is a thought-provoking discussion on the challenges we face and tips for success when it comes to your super and our super. And joining me today are my colleagues Tina Tran, one of our financial planners, and Justin Colley, who will be monitoring the chat box and join us at the end if we have time for questions and answers. And for any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box down the bottom of your screen. This presentation will be streamed live on Facebook, and there'll be a recording available on our YouTube channel tomorrow if you wanted to share the session with anybody. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of Ngunnawal country, the land on which I work and live, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also, before we begin, please note that any information we provide in this presentation is general in nature. It's designed to illustrate what you can do, not necessarily what you should do. So please don't take any action based on this information before considering how it applies to your own personal circumstances, objectives and needs. And always make sure you read the product disclosure document before you make any investments, and consider seeking financial advice to determine your best course of action. Introducing myself, there's a picture of me. My name's Tanya Rhodes. I'm one of the regional managers for Australian Catholic Super. I'm based in Canberra and my office is on the ground floor in the St Christopher's Pastoral Centre in Manuka. And I've been working in superannuation since 2008, and I have a genuine passion for all things super. Might sound a bit dorky, but the reason I say this is because I've seen how much of a positive impact super can have on people's retirement and their lives and the lives of their families. So even if retirement is a long way off, it's still important to pay attention to your super, because time sure goes quickly, and before you know it, you'll be thinking about retirement. And joining me is Tina Tran, one of our financial planners. Tina, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you enjoy most about being a financial planner.
Thank you, Tanya. I've been in financial planning for over 20 years, and I've always predominantly specialised in retirement planning and superannuation. And one of the, I guess, the joy that I get from working in financial planning in retirement is to be able to work with a member from, coming in and not really feeling very confident about their financial future, to then being able to help them to get a sense of direction and feeling confident that they can achieve a comfortable retirement. That's gives me a lot of satisfaction, because I do sort of meet with members at the initial phase, and then sometimes they've come in to check in a few years down the track, or maybe even at the time of retirement, and we've put them on that path, and it's very satisfactory to see that they are able to have that comfortable retirement.
Thank you for that, Tina. So let's set the scene for our presentation today. On this slide, you'll see some statistics provided by Women in Super, who are a not-for-profit organisation that work to improve women's retirement outcomes. And they do this by working with government, unions, employer organisations, regulators and superannuation funds like ourselves to campaign for a fairer super system by representing the voice of women in superannuation. And they believe that progress can only be achieved when people understand the problem, pledge their support to a solution and take action to change it. So that's why we're here today. Women in Super provided these stats to help illustrate the superannuation gap between women and men. And I'm just going to take you through a few of these. So generally speaking, women's salaries are lower than men, and on average, women retire with 24% less super than men. And this is one of the causes that leads to 34% of single Australian women over 60 living in income poverty. That compares to 27% of men. Women are also more dependent than men on the age pension. And sadly, the number of women over 55 experiencing homelessness has increased by 31% over the last 5 years. Women are the fastest growing cohort of homeless people. Although 47.4% of the workforce are women, a large proportion of women are part-time workers, which really pushes the pay and super gap even further as they earn less and work fewer hours. And even amongst full-time workers, female graduates have starting salaries that are almost 5% lower than men's. And after 3 years, this gap widens to 15.8%. And this is having done the same field of study as their male counterparts. But furthermore, almost twice as many women spend more than 5 hours a day caring for children compared to men. And here's some more statistics from Women in Super that illustrate the challenges. This first figure represents the impacts of the early release super scheme offered by the federal government. It was designed to help deal with the financial impact of COVID-19, and eligible Australians were able to access their super between April and December 2020. This early release scheme was taken up by over 3 million people, 40% of whom were aged between 25 and 34, and almost 500,000 people completely emptied their super accounts, with women being the larger proportion who did this. And it's expected that those people will have about 95,000 less in their super at retirement. So that's quite a big amount of money. Generally speaking, women's salaries are 14% less than men based on full-time earnings, and women retire with 24% less super than men. And the wages gap means that employer contributions are lower, and it's harder for women to make extra contributions to super as they have less disposable income. Women only receive a third of the government tax concessions on super. Men receive the other 2/3. Australian women also live on average 4 years longer than men, and combined with their lower super balances at retirement, they run out of super much earlier, which means there's going to be a portion of their retirement that they may not have any super at all to help support their lifestyle needs. But Tina, can you please tell us how this super gap can be addressed?
A good question, Tanya, and it is a big challenge, particularly when we are looking at the superannuation guarantee as a percentage is linked to salary. So if the salary is lower, naturally the superannuation contributions are going to be lower. And in addition, women taking time out to take care of children is also going to mean that they don't have the length of employment time. And again, super guarantee payments are linked to your working time. So in terms of what you can do personally, obviously you still have to work within the resources you have. And in my experience of working with members, if you are earning an income, it is possible for you to be able to do so, but it's a matter of planning. So making sure that you are putting money away for the future, and the earlier you can start, the better, because then you've got the benefit of time on that money, and it can make a significant difference, even if it's a small amount in your 20s, but it's there for 20 or 30 years. The compounding earnings effect can make a significant difference. So obviously, sort of being engaged in your superannuation and actively contributing from the get-go is going to make a difference. Also, this is not going to apply to everyone, but if you are married and your spouse is earning more, or you've taken time off to look after family, then naturally your spouse may have more superannuation than you will. And there are rules that allow you to equalise it through contributions, the spouse contribution, where a spouse can contribute to a low-income spouse to boost their super. There's things like spouse superannuation split. So when we're looking at advice, we always look at how we can equalise the superannuation balances with couples as a way to, it's managing taxation and transfer cap as well. It's not just one-sided reason, but there are some things that you can do, but the important thing is really to start taking, paying attention to what you're doing.
Thank you, Tina, that's great. And as mentioned at the start of this session, the International Women's Day theme is break the bias. So imagine a gender equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. And together we can forge women's equality, and collectively we can all break the bias. So understanding the challenges we face, we've started to talk about it today, and knowing some tips for success when it comes to your super, like some of the examples that Tina provided earlier, is really the first step to achieving better outcomes. Understanding a few basics about your super is a great way to start, and you can join us for our regular webinars and you can speak to us as often as you like. But it's important to review your super and to understand how much you have and how it's invested. And let's face it, it is your money and forms an important part of your future. So we couldn't encourage you more to start really taking an interest and turning your attention to it. You can log into your Australian Catholic super account online. You can also check your super balances via your MyGov login to see a summary of all of your super accounts if you have more than one. And that's a really handy place just to get used to navigating your way around. So we want you to think about your super, think about consolidating your super. We want to teach you some common strategies to boost your super. Tina's going to take you through some of those shortly. We're going to have a brief look at insurances within super and your investment options. And we're going to talk about how much super you might need to support your retirement, which is really what super is all about. We'll do a preview of our member portal for those of you that aren't familiar with it, and we'll check out some of the tools that are available to you. And finally, we're going to talk about some of the other ways we can support you that you may not be aware of. So by now we know there's a gap between male and female super, and we also know that learning more about how super works is really important, so you can learn to take advantage of the opportunities within super, and this can lead to better outcomes for you now and into the future. And as I said earlier, your super is your money and forms an important part of your future. But Tina, can you please take us through this slide and tell us a little bit about your experiences with members?
Certainly. The thing that I do see and try and encourage members is see their superannuation as an account that's no different from their bank account. It's just that they don't have access to it immediately. But if you can sort of see it that way, it's your money, not just some just a piece of paper with some numbers that you get once a year, because that's the way some people see it. It's not tangible for them, but it is funds that have been contributed for your retirement, and it belongs to you. And if you can take an active interest in making it work as hard as it can for you, it means you don't have to work as hard when you want to stop working. And yes, there are some rules and there's some complexity around some of those rules. But the main thing really to understand is that the superannuation structure or superannuation is designed to allow you to put money away for your financial future. And it's not as easily accessible because that's the purpose. So understanding contribution rules in terms of strategies to contribute more tax effectively, and also understanding when you can have access is obviously going to be important, because if you are planning to stop work, superannuation is going to be what you may rely on, and the rules around when that can happen is important. So in this case, for superannuation, it's called preservation age, and currently for most people the preservation age will be age 60. That doesn't mean that you can have access immediately at age 60 if you're still working, but it does mean that if you retire, that is possible. And in terms of contributions, there are lots of ways in which you can contribute to superannuation, and there's tax concessions, which we'll talk about a little bit further.
Thank you, Tina. Let me tell you a little bit about our fund. So Australian Catholic Super started in 1981 as a profit from members fund that assisted members from the Catholic education, Catholic healthcare, aged care and welfare sectors. But we're now open to anyone who is eligible for super, and we want to empower our members from all walks of life to live their best possible retirement. Today we continue to reinvest our profits to deliver products and services that benefit our members. And whether you're an individual looking to speak to somebody about your financial goals, or you're an employer seeking to take the hassle out of super administration, we're here to help you. We want you to consider consolidating your super, and we're here to assist with the process. Having only one super fund may work best for you, as having multiple accounts means it's harder to keep track of how much super you have, and you'll probably be paying more fees than you should. But please, before taking action, it's really important to review all of your existing super accounts to make sure you don't close an account that provides features and benefits that are important to you. Tina, can you please take us through this next set of slides talking about contributions, and let me know when you're ready for me to change slides.
Certainly. As you know, if you're working, earning a salary, your employer is obligated to contribute superannuation for you. And at the moment, the superannuation guarantee amount is 10%, which is actually quite a nice amount. But on the average, for most people, it isn't sufficient to provide you with a full retirement. On average, when I've worked with clients with the number, it's around the 15% mark if you are working 25 years. And obviously, it has to be a little bit more if you don't have as much time in the workforce or you haven't been contributing. So that's just a general guide. Now, in terms of contributing more, as I mentioned, your employer puts the 10%, but you can also top that up in a number of ways. You can top up the contributions into superannuation in a number of ways. And one very tax effective way to do it is to arrange with your employer to take part of your pre-tax salary and directly put it into superannuation rather than paying it as income. That's called a salary sacrifice arrangement. And the reason why there's some tax benefit is because that salary that you have earned, when it goes into superannuation, it's taxed at the superannuation contributions rate, which is 15%. Now, if you're earning and working a full-time salary, for most people, your marginal tax rate might be in the 32.5% bracket, which means that you would be losing 32.5% if it went into your bank account, whereas if it went into superannuation, you're only losing 15%. So you get to keep more of that money. There are some rules around that. The rules limit how much you can make in additional contributions from your pre-tax salary. And that's called the concessional contribution limits. On this slide, you can see concessional contribution limits are made up of what your employer contributions are, superannuation guarantee payments. For some people, their employment contract might mean that the employer pays more than the statutory 10%, which is pretty good. And that might be an extra 1 or 2 or 3%. That's also going to be counted under the concessional contributions limit. What I mentioned before, the salary sacrifice, that's going to be measured under the concessional contribution limits. And any contributions that you make yourself as a lump sum and you claim a tax deduction, that's also going to be treated as a concessional contribution limit. So all of those contributions are counted under this limit, and the limit is $27,500 per financial year since the 1st of July 21. It does change. It does get indexed up from time to time. So it's important, if you are making contributions into superannuation, you understand how your contributions compare against the limit and to make sure that it stays under the limit. So what is the advantage? The advantage, as I mentioned, is that contributions into superannuation from your salary before income tax, which is your gross income, is taxed at 15% versus paying income tax, which is usually on a salary that's from 45,000 and above, is going to be in the 32.5% tax bracket. So immediately you've already made money through that tax savings. And as you can imagine, over time, you've got that tax savings compounding and earning in your superannuation, which is money you would have lost if you didn't put it into superannuation. So that's the limitations around making contributions into superannuation from your pre-tax salary. It is also possible to make additional contributions over and above the concessional contribution cap, but it would be an after-tax contribution. So what this would mean is you've paid income tax on that money and then you've put it into superannuation. And that's also possible for you to arrange by either payroll deduction, or you can do it directly with the super fund by making a direct transfer or arranging a direct debit. So there's lots of ways in which you can arrange to have regular savings going into your superannuation through payroll or directly yourself. But from a tax efficiency point of view, we try to utilise your pre-tax up to the concessional limit as much as we can. And then if you're not in a position to do so because you need the money to meet your bills and living expenses, it is possible that you could utilise the concessional limits that you haven't utilised in a future year. So that gets a little bit more complicated, so it's important to get some advice around that. Not want to move on. Yeah. So let's have a look at some of the numbers to get you a little bit more clearer on what I mean by the tax savings. So on this slide, you can see the income tax rates that apply on salary and any investment earnings that you might generate from your bank account or any rental property that you have positive income from. It's all added together as your gross income, and these marginal tax rates apply. So that first 18,200 that you earn, that's free of tax. Once it goes over that up to 45,000, there is 19% tax on that. And then once it goes above the 45,000 up to the 120, it's 32.5%, and so forth. So as you can see, most full-time salary earners might be falling in between that 45,000 to 120,000 per annum salary bracket, which means that their marginal tax rate is 32.5%. And as you can imagine, putting that into superannuation and paying 15% is a lot less than 32.5%. But it does mean that you don't have that money available to spend today. It is available for your future. So let's have a look at the guarantee payments, the superannuation guarantee payments that your employer puts in. And so that's the next slide there, Tanya. So your employer super guarantee payments are legislated to go up in, as you can see in the slide, it was 10% this year, and it's legislated to go up to 10.5%. So increasing by 0.5% each year up to 12%. Now 12% is really a good base, particularly if you are starting your working career now. You know, pretty much will have 12% of your wages going into superannuation. So that's going to accumulate nicely. But if you can boost it a little bit more to bring that up, that's going to give you a more comfortable retirement. And the salary sacrifice strategy is a very effective way for you to do that. Let's have a look at the next slide, which shows you an actual example. I've got here the example is on someone who's earning $100,000 per annum. So we calculate that out on a fortnightly basis at $3,846. That's before income tax. On the left-hand column, the tax is calculated out on that gross amount, and the take-home pay is $2,884 a fortnight. This example, if you were to salary sacrifice 5% of that salary, that's a fortnightly gross amount of $192 per fortnight. That then reduces your taxable income by that much. And as a result, your take-home pay is going to go down because you've put some money into superannuation. So the take-home pay for that is $2,757. So that is a difference of $127. You're basically given up $127 that fortnight, but you've got more going into superannuation. And the difference is $66 a fortnight difference by putting it into super versus taking it at home as pay. And as you can imagine, if you were to annualize that out, it's $1,716. Take that out over 10 years, it's $17,160. Haven't even sort of included investment earnings compounding on that. So it can make a significant difference over time from starting with a small amount and allowing that time to compound. So that's sorry, that was the salary sacrifice example. As I mentioned, there's a cap on that, which is that $27,500 per annum. Now, some people misunderstand and think, oh, that's all I can put into superannuation. That's actually not the case. You can put more than that. It's just that you cannot put more under the pre-tax strategy. Okay? So in this case, if you have contributed up to that limit and you're still in a position to contribute more into superannuation, then you can contribute after tax. And the cap there is a lot more generous. You can see in this side, if you're under 67 years of age, you can put $110,000 per annum as a lump sum. You could put it as a regular payment. It's just all going to be counted in the financial year under the cap. In this case, it's called non-concessional, and that's $110,000. There is also provision to allow you to contribute in advance for 3 years. That's called the bring forward rule. So you could contribute up to 3 years worth of the annual rate, which is making that up to $330,000 in one go. And that means that you just use the future cap for 3 years, and you wouldn't be able to make any further non-concessional contribution until the expiration of that period. So that's the extra cap under the non-concessional contribution that you can make. There are some rules around making personal non-concessional contributions. If you're between the age of 67 and 74, there is a work test that is required to be met, although that's very recently been removed. Recent legislation change, like literally in a matter of weeks, whereby the cap is still the same, but you're now no longer required to meet a work test. So you can be retired, but if you happen to have some spare money, whether that's through an inheritance or you've sold your property or sold shares, and you've got funds that you would like to invest in superannuation, you can actually do that. You don't have to be working to do that.
That's a great piece of news, Tina.
It just makes life a lot easier.
Is that available to members now, or is that from the start of the next financial year?
It's from the next financial year, the 1st of July 2022. Legislation was changed, but it's from next financial year. So the contributions require you to meet the work test if you are over 67, but from next financial year, you don't need to meet the work test.
That's a really good tip. I think anybody who's considering putting a large lump sum of money into super would probably be best to sort of talk to one of your representatives at Australian Catholic Super, just to understand the correct timing of that. And I'm sure that Tina and her team of financial advisors would be happy to support
so
those
certainly when it comes to superannuation, it's really important to understand the contribution rules, and because they do change from time to time. So what you may have understood it to be a few years ago might actually be different today. It has been progressively adjusted so that it's more simpler, although that also makes it complicated because it's changed.
Right.
So important to just check the rules before you take any action around your superannuation in regards to making contributions in terms of the rules and the caps.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tina. We'll go to the next slide. This one I'm going to briefly touch on the different types of insurance that are available within the Australian Catholic Super Fund, and then just ask Tina some questions. So we do provide insurance cover for death, total and permanent disability, and income protection. But Tina, do you mind please explaining what each of these insurances are, and also why insurance is important in all stages of somebody's career or working life?
Insurance is one of those things that we usually don't appreciate that we have it until we come to a situation where we have to claim. So sometimes you might go through life and nothing happens, and then you may feel like you've been ripped off because you've paid all this money out to insurance. But that's what insurance is for. It's to give you peace of mind that if something goes wrong, you've got some resources available to you. And it's quite important, particularly when you are younger, you haven't got a lot of assets to back you up, and you're relying on your capacity to earn an income in order to meet the bills. So what has happened with regards to insurance is that the superannuation fund has recognised that there is a need for insurance for most people, and they've the trustees have sort of made a very simple assumption of, okay, well, this is the minimum amount that would be accepted immediately when someone joins and through a sponsored fund as a default level of cover for your age, but you can always have the option to adjust the level of cover to suit your circumstances, adjust the policy to suit your circumstance. So in this case, for most superannuation funds, the insurance policies that may be taken or that you've opted into are going to usually include death cover or life cover, if you want to call it that way, essentially providing a lump sum in the event of death, and that is on top of the value of your superannuation. Okay, so that's a separate insurance policy that would provide for a lump of money on top of whatever superannuation balance that you have paid by the insurer to cover death and also usually terminal illness. The other policies that are included is a total and permanent disability lump sum policy. So in this case, the definition is usually if you're working and you're unable to continue working and you're permanently disabled, that would also potentially meet a permanent disability claim, and the insurer will pay a lump of money to your superannuation. And lastly, the income protection policies. So the income protection policy is not a lump sum policy. It's like a replacement of your wage. And usually there is a waiting period and a benefit period. So the waiting period is the length of time that you would have to be off work and still sick before a claim is paid. So in most waiting times, options vary from 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Most likely the default, meaning the options that are automatically accepted, maybe either 90 days or 60 days, and then you can adjust that. Benefit period is how long that income would be paid for if you're still off work due to illness. And benefit periods can range from 2 years, 5 years, to age 65 to age 67. It can vary depending on the policy. So again, most of the default policies are not going to have necessary long-term benefit period. They will maybe only 2 years or 5 years, and that might be not adequate, particularly if you're younger and your working life is much longer. So if you did suffer an illness that was permanent and you couldn't work, then having a long-term cover might be important. So you do have the possibility of making those adjustments in your insurance cover. And what is important for a lot of people is knowing what is the cover that you have, does it suit your situation, and what are you paying for that? And we're able to provide advice to help members to work out how much cover they should have and what the cost of that. And if you're looking at more comprehensive advice, we can also recommend appropriate policies.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Tina. I think, it can sound quite confusing, and I have experienced a scenario with sitting down with one of our financial planners and just really working through some of those details of, do you have enough? Should you make an adjustment? But yeah. Tina, have you experienced any circumstances where people might have insurance in their super, but, perhaps they don't necessarily need it?
Yes. So I mentioned before that for most people, we need insurance of some sort, particularly younger people, and that you've got possibly a mortgage or some loans, and you may have dependent children. So relying on your ability to work is quite important. But as you get older in life and you have accumulated, savings, you've paid off your mortgage, you've got assets to back you up, you have more superannuation, at that time, insurance may be less relevant. So I do come across a lot of members who still have insurance in their superannuation and didn't realise that they could cancel it at any time because they no longer may need it, because they've got financial resources that they could rely on without having to pay a premium for a policy. And also I've had members come in where they've had a potential claim, whether it was an illness or a permanent disability, and they didn't claim. So we were able to alert them to it, and they were able to put a claim through, because it can be paid even though they've gone back to work. So I think what's important is understanding what you've got, what you're paying for, and whether it's appropriate for your situation.
Thank you for that. We do have quite a lot of information on our website as well about our different insurances in super. And if you check out your most recent statement, or you log in and look at your account online, you should be able to see the amount of insurance that you've got, and have a bit of a think about that.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Thank you. At the Australian Catholic Super Fund, we offer 14 different investment options. So you can make a choice of what investment option you like to be in. We've got information about each of our options on our website, and this information helps describe the composition of each option, who it might be suitable for, and what the historical returns have been like, among other things. We also offer financial advice on this topic to our members at no additional cost. And this is something that I encourage all members to do at least once a year, or whenever their personal circumstances change, because it can be quite confusing. So if you would like to receive advice on what investment option would be most suitable for you, please make sure to request an appointment from one of our team members. I think this next slide, I'm going to throw it over to Tina, but before we do, I just wanted to say that I think that one of the most valuable things that financial advice can do for you is to help you understand when you can afford to retire. I mean, everyone wants to know that, and how long your money will last. And we often get asked that question, how much do we need? But it's not a one-size-fits-all thing at all. And over the next couple of slides, we'll show you an example of financial projections that you might receive in a financial plan. But Tina, I'd love you to explain how you determine when somebody can retire, and maybe talk at a couple of those points on that slide as well.
Big questions. And that is pretty much what everybody wants to know, is when can I retire? And it's essentially when you can have income that's paid to you without having to work for it. And that can come from any resource that you have accumulated. But for most people, it is superannuation. And the way in which we can answer that question is through financial modelling, financial forecasting. Essentially, what your lifestyle requirements are in terms of, paying for your house bills, running a car, medical health expenses, lifestyle, all of that needs to be quantified, and you get a good sense of that by looking at what you're doing now. And if that can be then calculated against the assets that you have. So the assets that could be part of your retirement funding for most people would be superannuation. It could also be the age pension if you're working and you're eligible at that time. And it could be any other savings that you've accumulated, whether it's shares or rental property. And we look at all the resources you have available, and we can calculate and determine whether you're on track if you are planning towards retirement, or if you're at that time where you want to look at whether you've got sufficient assets. So our number crunching sort of process can get a pretty good prediction of whether there's enough money there to support the retirement lifestyle that you want. And in terms of, when is enough, that's really going to be your decision. If you want to have a more expensive lifestyle, then you just need to have more capital, and so you've got to work more towards that. We're not, my role here is to help members define what it is what they have, what is it that they want, and crunch it the numbers so that they can get a sense of the ability to make that decision on the decisions about spending today and the compromising for the future.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
How have you unexpected events like COVID impacted some of your clients' retirement plans, Tina?
The last 2 years have been interesting for everyone. Fortunately for a lot of our members who've worked in Catholic education, they've been able to keep their jobs, so their income has been continued. For members that have retired over this year, whether it's been good or bad, they've actually ended up not spending as much money on the lifestyle component, for example, when travel has been a part of that, so they couldn't go overseas, although they might have redirected that money into domestic travel or maybe improving their home. The investment markets have had a little bit of a downturn at the very beginning in 2020, so that was a bit of a scary period for some retirees at that time, seeing the market had turned very quickly in a short period of time. And it was just a case of not panicking and sticking with their long-term investment strategy, and that's come up again. So I think it's has obviously impacted people in different ways in regards to, how much they may have spent in the expected lifestyle, but it hasn't been adverse to the extent that they've probably spent less rather than more. From a longevity point of view, maybe for some people, if they've lost their job or they've got less income coming in, that might have pulled back a little bit in terms of their tracking towards retirement.
Okay, I think it sounds like working with a financial planner could be really helpful to cover those unexpected events, and giving you an idea of the importance of having a plan B potentially, or a rainy day fund or something, if that's at all possible.
That's pretty much what planning is about, is planning for the best and also being prepared for the worst.
Thank you. Okay, Tina, can you please take us through the next few slides? Just let me know when you're ready for me to move on, and I'll press the button.
So this example illustrates the number crunching process that we go through in determining how the wealth position or how the superannuation assets are going to move over time. In this case here, we've got a couple both age 65, and they have 300,000 each. So combined superannuation is 600,000. They're homeowners, so they don't owe any mortgage on their existing home. And the amount of income, which is the amount of money they'd like to receive per year, is $63,000. And that would be a very average amount for a couple to be able to have what is defined as a comfortable retirement. Now that can obviously differ. For some people, they could be comfortable with less. Some people that would not be comfortable and they need more. So this is just an average. They don't have any other investments, and we are running the projections based on inflation rate of 2.5%. So in our assumption, cost of living goes up by 2.5% each year. We've used an investment return of 5%, so there's very, very modest return. And the cost of living as is linked to that inflation rate. And so what we're illustrating is in today's dollars. So if you go to the next slide, you will see the way in which that money is running down. So at the start, we've got age 65, they've got 600,000, and you can see that there's a gradual rundown of that capital until about age 93. That's when they pretty much used up all of their money based on those numbers. And what is included in that is shown in the next slide, because it's not fully funded by superannuation. As you can imagine, if they were drawing $63,000 per year out of a superannuation capital of 600,000, earning 5%, it would run out much quicker than what this projection is showing. But in the next slide, you can see that it is income sources are coming from both their own money, which is that superannuation, and also age pension. So in this graph, we can see where the source of income is coming from. So from the first bar, they are fully self-funded because they're not pension age as yet at 65. It's 67. Sorry, in this case for this couple, their pension age is 66.5. So in that first year of retirement, they are self-funded. They would have to meet their 63,000 per annum from their own resources, which is superannuation. And then in the second year, we've got eligibility for a part age pension. So that's reflected in that blue bar. And if their income requirement is 63,000 and the age pension is giving them about 20,000, so they're pulling out 43 to bring the income up to 63. So when we see over time, there's an increase in age pension. So as the age pension increases, they don't have to spend as much of their own money. And that slows down the withdrawal. And when Gary gets to about age 74, that's when they're both on the full age pension. And that's the maximum they can both get. So it looks like it's about 60%. It's providing 60% of their income target of 63,000. And they are then supplementing the lifestyle up to 63 with their own money. And we see that fully sort of running out at around age 92, 93, okay, on those assumptions. So it is, I think what a lot of people may hear around the traps is, you know, you need $1 million to retire. And that could be true if you are retiring well before age pension age. You may need that much because you have to be self-funded before you get to age pension, or if your lifestyle needs are more than 63,000. If you are going to be more active and do more, say, overseas travel, you might need 70,000 per annum. And that doesn't necessarily mean you may need that all the way through your retirement. You may only be doing that up to your age, 75, 80. So we can tailor the financial modelling a little bit more for individuals that come in and they want a little bit more tailoring. But this one's a very simple example of, spending stays the same in today's dollars, and we've sort of taken that out through to age 93 in this example. illustrating how a couple retiring at age 65 could have a comfortable retirement with superannuation of about 600,000.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tina. Okay. So Tina's mentioned a couple of ways that we can help through financial advice, but we can also provide general information. You can have a look at our website where there's a lot of information and tools you can use. You can talk to one of your regional managers like myself, because our job is to deliver personalised service and information to our members. Or you can contact our helpline team by calling 1300 658 776. You can also access our limited advice service, which is provided for all members and funded through your membership fee. Justin's going to add a link for this in the chat if you want to book an appointment. And this is a service I encourage all members to use, because remember, everything we've been talking about today is just general information. However, personal financial advice will help you to work out what's right for you. Tina, can you please explain our comprehensive advice service, just a little bit more detail about how that all works?
So while we focus on superannuation and the rules, when it comes to providing financial advice, we look at everything. So that is coming from understanding what your income requirements are, and if you need help around budgeting, we can help with that. That's a foundation of managing money. And then we take it further in looking at the next stage of what you can do with surplus or savings to make it work for you. And for some people, it may be that putting money into superannuation is not the most effective, even though it's tax effective. It may not be effective for their personal situation, because they might be in a situation where they have credit cards to pay off, or personal loans, or mortgage, or they need to save or provision for some expenditure that is more short term. So we can also look at advice around that. We focus on superannuation predominantly for making sure that you've got some money set aside for your retirement, and it's very effective to do so. So when you're younger, it may be a smaller amount. When you're older, you may need to really boost it up a little bit more in order, particularly if you're behind with your tracking for, retirement savings. We also can help members who are already in retirement age and looking at, when can I stop work, and do I have enough to retire? And beyond that, if you are in a situation where you're retired, but perhaps you've received an inheritance, or you've sold your home and you've bought a cheaper place and there's surplus in capital and you don't know what to do with that, and you want that money to work a little bit harder, we can certainly provide advice around that. We can also provide advice on other superannuation funds. So a lot of people think, oh, you can only, you work for Australian Catholic Super. With comprehensive advice, we have a license to provide a full range of the financial planning service. And if your husband or partner, or if you've got other superannuation fund, we can review that and provide advice on other superannuation funds if it is appropriate for your situation.
Fantastic, thank you, Tina. We also offer a member portal where you can track your super, and it's just like online banking. I think we mentioned that before. It's really important that you register if you haven't already done so, and it's pretty straightforward. But here's a snapshot of what it looks like when you log into the member portal. You can see your account balance history. You can see on that slide that it's that particular person has enjoyed an increase in their account balance over the years. You can see your account summary for the current financial year, money going in the way of contributions and investment earnings, and then the fees that you've been paying. You can also see across the top of the web page some options you can click on to take you to more details on your account. You can transact on your account through the web portal. You can make a contribution, you can change your investment options, and you can nominate a beneficiary in the event of your death, among a few other things. And if you don't really like using the internet or a computer or a laptop and you prefer to do things on your phone, we also have an app, which is something that not everybody is aware of. So check that out. So what can I do right now? Well, we think it's time to take action. It's never too late and it's never too early. Make sure that you log into the member portal or register if you haven't already done so. Speak to your local regional manager or talk to one of our financial advice team, or all of those options. You can call us, you can email us, and you can visit us in your local office, pending COVID restrictions. It seems to be okay right now. We have 2 offices in Sydney. We've got 1 in Brisbane, 1 in Canberra, where I am, 1 in Townsville, 1 in Port Macquarie, and 1 in Perth. And after this session, you'll receive a survey where you can elect to have one of your regional managers contact you over the next few days if you'd like to have a discussion, just to get the ball rolling on starting to get interested in your super. So Tina, do you have any summary points on what women should be thinking about before we move to questions?
The summary is firstly understand your superannuation in terms of how it's invested, what insurances you have, what contributions are going in. Then you can move forward with working out what it is that you want to achieve and what needs to be done in order to achieve that. And once you have those sort of framework, then seek advice, because we're going to be in a better position to provide you with a strategy on how to do it effectively.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Justin, welcome. Do we have any questions that?
Yeah, thanks, Tanya and Tina. You both did a wonderful job tonight. It's very informative, and our members have thought so as well. And a lot of the questions that have come through, you've actually answered after the questions came through. So some of the members did preempt some of the things we're going to talk about. So that was good as well, that you're talking about what members wanted to hear tonight. There was one, well, there's a couple here that I'll just touch on. The first one, this section is very interesting. Can you really go through how I can book an appointment? What's the easiest process for me to do that? And I just want to clarify something you did say a little bit earlier, Tanya. There's no link in the chat box. That will be in this survey that gets sent out tonight.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, booking an appointment, Tanya or Tina?
Yeah, we can get in contact with the member.
Yeah, the easiest way would be just to complete the feedback form that we send you in the survey tonight, and we'll reach out to make that appointment for you. Would be the easiest thing. The next question we had is in relation to the consolidation. It was, will I lose my insurance and my other funds if I roll over? I'll direct that to you, Tanya.
Oh, certainly, yes. Okay, so I think yes, you will. So when you do roll over a super account from one fund to another, you are essentially closing the account from which you are rolling over. And the effect of closing account does cancel any insurances. Now, there are certain processes where you can potentially look to transfer insurance cover. It's certainly something to keep in mind before you actually hit the rollover button or you do initiate the rollover. So always recommend that you review your insurances that you have within all of your super accounts, and just keep in mind that if you don't do something to prevent it, you will cancel insurance when you roll over. And I think that's really important to understand, particularly as we get a little bit older. If you do have the default insurance that Tina was talking about earlier, that has just been provided to you without having to go through any medical questionnaires, you might find that that is actually really valuable to you, because we do know that as we do get older, sometimes things pop up and we might develop medical conditions that you won't be able to insure. So you don't want to get too complicated, but the key message is just be careful. And if you do roll over without taking care, you could lose some valuable insurance cover.
Yeah, it's a very important point, isn't it, Tanya? If you do have insurance, contact the fund and we'll try and transfer that insurance for you first before you roll any money over, just in case you don't want to lose any of those benefits. The next question I had is, can you still, well, sorry, not still, but can you make spouse contributions? I'll direct that to you, Tina.
The can you make spouse contribution? If you have a spouse, firstly, you can make a spouse contribution. So the rules for a spouse to receive contribution is the same rules to make contribution. So before age 67, you had to meet the work test. They've scrapped that, so you can make a contribution. But they the incentive that the government has given to encourage contributions for your spouse is that there is a tax offset that the contributing spouse can get if they put money into super for their low income or non-working spouse. So that is a little bit of an incentive. So it gives you a tax offset of $540 up to a contribution amount of $3,000. You can contribute more, but the offset is up to that amount. So yes, you can contribute for your spouse, and they can be working or non-working. The contribution is measured against the non-concessional cap.
Great, thanks, Tina. That's all the questions we have. So I'll drop back out and leave it to you, Tanya and Tina, to wrap things up for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. So thank you to all of you who have joined us today. We are inspired by you, and we wish to empower you to look into your super and to be inspired by your super. It could be one of the largest assets that you ever have. But when it comes to International Women's Day, every day we want to break the bias. We want to achieve what we can achieve. We want a future that gives us true gender equality. And Tina, I'm not sure if you've got any other words that you'd like to add.
I think you've said it all, Tanya.
Thanks for coming along, everybody, and stay safe in this crazy weather. Okay, bye now.
Thank you.